A lighthouse keeper left everything to me instead of his own son, and the moment I discovered the reason why everything he'd protected was in danger, Mr. Caldwell handed me the brass polish and pointed at the lighthouse's Fresnel lens towering above us. "Your turn today," he said with that quiet smile. We had fallen into this routine over the past 3 years since I started working the gift shop downstairs, and he taught me everything about running the lighthouse while his son, who worked in the city, hadn't visited in over a year. 3 weeks later, a lawyer walked into the gift shop and told me Mr. Caldwell had passed away. And then she said something that made the floor tilt beneath my feet. He had left me the entire lighthouse in his will. Everyone expected his son to inherit it. The lawyer handed me an envelope with my name in his handwriting and left. The son showed up the next morning and pounded on the gift shop door. When I opened it, he pushed past me and started pacing. "You manipulated him," he said. "There's no other explanation for why he would leave everything to someone who worked in a gift shop instead of his own family." I tried to explain that his father had been teaching me for years, but he talked over me. My lawyer says we have grounds to contest based on undue influence. 2 days later, he returned with a developer who spread plans across the counter showing the lighthouse converted into a vacation rental. The developer said he had discussed this with Mr. Caldwell before he died, which was a lie because Mr. Caldwell told me developers had been circling for years. The son said once the legal situation was resolved, they were selling because the property was worth a fortune. A week later, I got a letter threatening a lawsuit if I didn't give up my claim. And the same afternoon, the harbor master said if I couldn't demonstrate proper qualifications within 30 days, the Coast Guard would shut down the light permanently. I couldn't sleep that night because I felt like I was failing Mr. Caldwell. At 2 in the morning, I drove to the lighthouse and finally opened the envelope he had left. His letter explained his son had called the lighthouse a dying relic, but I was the first person in decades who actually wanted to learn what it meant. At the bottom, he wrote, "Check the charts in the lens room. Everything you need to understand is there." I climbed the dark spiral stairs and found the navigation charts, and behind them I discovered hand-drawn maps tied with twine, covered in his handwriting and illustrations. The maps showed every cove and tide pool for miles, covered in notes about seal pupping grounds and rare starfish colonies and sea caves accessible only during the lowest tides. One map had a section circled in red ink with a sanctuary written across the top, showing 3 hidden coves and caves that were part of the lighthouse property. I spread everything across the floor. At the bottom was a letter sealed in plastic, and his handwriting explained his son called him obsessed and a waste of space. But I was the only person who ever asked why he stayed. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, and the son burst through the doorway with the developer behind him. "What the hell are you doing in here?" I stood up with my phone already recording. "Your father was documenting a protected marine sanctuary for 40 years, I said. "These maps prove it, and I'm sending them to the Coast Guard right now." The son lunged forward and tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. "You think some drawings of fish are going to stop me from selling what's mine? If there's documented ecological significance here, this property just became worthless to me," he said. "Marine sanctuary designation means no development permits for decades." He was already backing toward the stairs. The son whirled on him. "You're just going to believe her?" The developer disappeared down the steps, and the son turned back to me with something dangerous in his eyes. "You know what the sickest part is?" he said, his voice dropping to something cold. "My father told me 2 months before he died that he loved this lighthouse more than he ever loved me, and I told him to go to hell and die alone with his precious light." His hands were shaking. "And you know what? He did exactly that." The silence between us felt like falling, and then he grabbed one of the maps and ripped it in half. "If I can't sell it, nobody gets it," he said. I held up my phone. "I already photographed everything," I said quietly. "You can destroy every map in this room and it won't matter." He stared at me for a long moment, then threw the torn pieces at my feet and walked out. I stood there alone with Mr. Caldwell's maps scattered across the floor, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the back of one map near the sanctuary marking, there was a handwritten note that said, "The cave at the lowest point holds what I couldn't save then, but she can save now." I had no idea what that meant. The Coast Guard validated Mr. Caldwell's research, and within 2 weeks, the state designated the area as a protected sanctuary, with the lighthouse as the monitoring station. The son dropped his challenge, and I moved into the keeper's cottage, and 3 months later I followed one of his maps to a sea cave during low tide and found a crate with salvaged items from shipwrecks. Inside was a letter from my grandmother to her brother, who had been lost at sea 43 years ago.